So, really, a day like today, Yud Kislev, the one that should be farbringing is Rabbi Levin. Why? Because this is truly a celebration that began in Russia, and for most of the years it wasn't in Russia, and it's really, the way I grew up, the feeling was that the Russian Chasidim, you know, they really have this feeling for Yud Kislev. So really he should be talking, but you always want, you know, some guest. Okay.
Because Poland and Russia in the old time was one country.
So, first I want to just some factual things, historical things, just a few tidbits to get to know what the day is about. Because when you celebrate something and you want it to have, like Rabbi Levin said, a pa'ula, a result, you need to know what took place. And from there you can extrapolate and see how it applies to us in our lives. So briefly, very briefly, what happened on Yud Kislev was the following. The Mittler Rebbe of Doiv Ber, who was a son of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe had three sons. Reb Doiv Ber, Reb Chaim Avram, and Reb Moshe. Mittler Rebbe, parenthetically, why is he called the Mittler Rebbe? Why is it the Rebbe? Why is he called the Mittler Rebbe? So, during the lifetime of the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rebbe Nachum Mendel, the Tzemach Tzedek, they called him the Rebbe. They referred to his father-in-law as the middle one, the Mittler. That's a Yiddish word meaning middle. And the Balatanya, the one who started the Chabad movement, as the Alter Rebbe. That's how the name came to be known as Mittler Rebbe. Okay? In other words, during the lifetime of the Mittler Rebbe, they didn't call him the Mittler Rebbe, they called him the Rebbe. The Rebbe of that time was called the Rebbe, like our Rebbe is the Rebbe. Anyway, so.
But between the three brothers, he was the middle one? No.
He was the oldest. So, the Mittler Rebbe replaced the Alter Rebbe. That itself, there's stories upon stories and details, but we can't shout, you know, we got to focus on the Mittler Rebbe. So, when after he became a Rebbe, and he led his Chasidim throughout greater Ukraine and Russia, all over, White Russia, whatever, that whole region, he emphasized very much several nekudas, several points. One was the deep study of Chassidus, not just to study Chassidus in a cursory way, which means what I call in today's English vernacular, couch potato reading, where you lay down on a couch, it's very comfortable, and you take a sefer or a book and you read. That's very good and it's very important, but that's not what he was talking about. He's talking about what we call in the Olam HaTorah iyun, to be ma'ayin, or in the Lashon of Chabad, das, to use. Do me a favor, turn your phones off, please. Das means to delve deeply into something. That's das. Not to just take it at face value, but why and how and where. That's a whole different method of study. You're all educated, you know that is real study. The Mittler Rebbe wanted of his Chasidim, and us who are extension of his Chasidim, that when we study Chassidus in particular, that's the way we should study Chassidus. I was telling my wife, I reminded myself, I knew I was coming to Farbring, so I was thinking about different things I heard in yeshiva about the Mittler Rebbe. So there was a word that by Mashpir, Rabbi Yoel Kahn told us, and And he really, fabrained about this Nakuda, and maybe later we could talk about it more. But this was the following, maybe Rabbi Levin has heard this, but this is what he said. And he heard it from a chassid named Reb Shoel Ber Zislin. Reb Shoel Ber Zislin learned in Lubavitch, and he was a Muslim, they called him. A Muslim means he was like good in everything. He knew Gemara, he knew Chassidus, he knew how to sing Nigunim, and he knew how to speak well. He was a Muslim. That's what he called a Muslim. And he was known in Lubavitch as Shoel Ber. Later he came to Eretz Yisrael, and he was a Rav in Tel Aviv. Not in Lubavitch shul, in the Ashkenaz shul. My father actually would hear him sometimes give a Chumash Rashi shir or Chazer HaMaimer. The way a Chazer HaMaimer was like he would get up like he was giving a drosha, and he would start with a Gemara, and he was Chazering a Maimer Chassidus. And he was a very gifted person. So Reb Shoel Ber said like this, that he heard, you understand, he was born in the late 1800s. So he might have even heard still from a chassid of the Mittler Rebbe, or Tzemach Tzedek, probably Tzemach Tzedek, I'm not sure, in the Mittler Rebbe. Anyway, this is what he heard. Mashiach's time, he said. When will it be Mashiach's time? When Lubavitch Chasidim will learn Chassidus the way others learn a piece of Gemara. And what did he mean? Not the Chas v'Sholem dismiss Gemara, Chas v'Chalila, but he meant that everyone learns a shtickle Gemara. Who doesn't learn a piece of Gemara? Is anyone doesn't learn a piece of Gemara? So, the average kind of learning is you learn, Daf HaYomi. It's a gewaltige Zach, right? And people should learn it. But, it's not Iyun. So the Mittler Rebbe's Chasidim, Reb Shoel Ber said that the Mittler Rebbe's Chasidim said, Mashiach will come when the Golus is so great. And how did they identify the greatness of the Golus? That us Lubavitch Chasidim will learn Chassidus the way we learn a piece of Gemara, which is without depth and Eon. And of course, people learn to the Gemara be Eon, but it's don't take the words Simtsum Kipshuta. You know what that means? Don't extrapolate, understand what he's getting at. The greater idea that the study, in other words, the study of Torah, be it Gemara, be it Chassidus, has to be Be'iyun. And if it's not Be'iyun, it's not deep. That's Golus. Rabbi Yoel, when he told us this, we are these young American little schnuckelach, little bachrim who like ice cream, popcorn, and baseball. So he explained to us that learning Chassidus requires, to go deep into it, delve into it. Ba'amkus, das. That's Chochmah, Bina das, Chabad, right? What is das?
Understand.
Not just understanding, it's depth. Depth. In English, the word would be focus and concentration. To focus on something. To concentrate, not just to know the information, not just to understand the information, but that the information becomes part of you because you focused on it, you concentrated. So, going back to the Mittler Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe wanted that his Chassidim should learn Chassidus Be'iyun. Another thing that he wanted was that Chassidim should be proud of being Chassidim. Now you're going to ask, what does that mean? The Alter Rebbe didn't want his Chassidim to be proud of being Chassidim. You all know that the Alter Rebbe was in prison because he was informed on by what at the time was called Misnagdim. The Rebbe says, there's no more Misnagdim today. So if the Rebbe says it, it is azay. It is that way. We have Litvisha, but Misnagdim, the Rebbe said, that period is finished. But in the time of the Alter Rebbe, it wasn't finished. And the Alter Rebbe was vindicated. Next 9 days from today, Yutes Kislev. Everyone knows the Chag HaGiul of the Yutes Kislev. But there was still an aftermath. When something is finished, it doesn't just end. it lingers on and takes quite a long time for it to be completely over. That's the way nature is. Well, the same thing was here. And Chasidim, the Lubavitcher Chasidim, although the Alter Rebbe was vindicated, it still wasn't very rosy. Okay? A lot of stories about that, but this is definitely not the time to talk about that. It's not relevant, but I want to just bring out one point. The point is that the Mittler Rebbe said, and when I read this for the first time, it just blew me away, and I imagine you know about this. The Mittler Rebbe told us Chasidim, if you're having issues in other shuls, make your own shul. If the Misnagdim are driving you nuts and not letting you say your nusach and everything else, don't fight with them. Make your own nusach shul. And I never heard such a thing from the Alter Rebbe and from the but the Mittler Rebbe at that time, it was necessary because it was still a hangover, okay? A hangover from the times of the Alter Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe, when after the Alter Rebbe passed away, he was in Kremenchuk, in Ukraine. The Alter Rebbe passed away, was buried in Hadich. It's far away. Why was he in Kremenchuk? Because he was sent there to raise funds by the Alter Rebbe. Why did they need funds? They needed funds because his house, the Alter Rebbe's house, was burnt down, and many other homes, because Napoleon took revenge. As everyone knows, he wanted to have something with the Alter Rebbe, even a little item, a chayfetz. Alter Rebbe made sure he shouldn't get it, so he took revenge, and he decided, I'm going to burn and destroy Yiddish houses left and right. So it was very difficult. The Alter Rebbe sent the Mittler Rebbe to Kremenchuk too, which was a larger city with more established Yiddishkeit, etc. And over there, she raised money. But the Alter Rebbe passed away, and he wasn't there. He wasn't there at the Istalkus when he passed on. So now the question is, what's going to happen? Where's he going to go? There's nothing. The Alter Rebbe at that time lived in Liadi, right? And he ran away from Liadi. So what is he going to go back to Liadi? The house of the Alter Rebbe is destroyed. The place is a wreck. If we'll get to the game. So Anash from different places, from different cities, from Vitebsk and other places, they came to the Alter Rebbe, to the Mittler Rebbe, and they said, we want you here. Bistun ze Rebbe, you're our Rebbe. Right? Like you imagine, the Rebbe's here, come to Kensington. Borough Park, no, come to Borough Park. Everyone will say, ich will the Rebbe, but avoided by me. The Rebbe's in Crown Heights. But, you know, the Chassid would like the Rebbe, so especially if you're running away, you don't have a... So, my wife and I were talking about this today. Why did the Mittler Rebbe choose Lubavitch? So there's two girsais. I don't know even why. The Frierdiker Rebbe says it's because of this. Frierdiker Rebbe says in the Sikha, it's because the Alter Rebbe came to him in a dream, and he said, when I was 10 years old, I learned with Rabbi Socha Ber of Lubavitch in this house in Lubavitch. And then it was raised. There was no house there. It was a plot of land. And he said, go to Lubavitch, build over there a house, and make the center of Lubavitch in Lubavitch. And that's why the Mittler Rebbe ended up in Lubavitch. Some other stories of the two brothers later, but that's what I read today. B'Shem the Frierdiker Rebbe. That's why he chose Lubavitch over Vitebsk and some other places where people wanted him to come. But you can want Lubavitch over Dav Geld. Rabbi Levin needs money to build a building, this big building. Without Geld and the Ilam Haz in this world, you don't have money, you don't go. That's the way it is. So, Chasidim gave money. Chasidim gave money. I don't want to get into, there's so many things to talk about. But I heard from Chasidim, from Mendel Futterfass and others, my Shverim, Chaim Sereblansky, I heard from them how by Chasidim, when a Chassid needed something, and especially a Rebbe, it wasn't an issue. In other words, everyone gave money. There's not even a question. But because the money lechatchila by Chasidim, by the real Chasidim, was it's not my money. And Take, if a Chassid thought it was his money, he got it. And I'll tell you a story that my Shver told me. Das weißt du nicht. He told me this himself. This is what he told me. There was a Fabrengen once in Samarkand. And that is Fabrengen Mendel Futterfass was Fabrengen. And there was Osher Batumer, Osher Sasonkin. Was a known Chassid. He came here. And they're sitting in Fabrengen. And my Shver says, he saw with his own eyes. In the middle of Fabrengen, and Mendel Futterfass turns to Osher, who is his good friend. He's talking about a good friend of his. And he says, Osher, leg avet the Geld auf den Tisch. Osher, put your money down on the table now. Osher gave tzedakah, and he remember him. But empty out your pockets. You need to be a Lubavitcher Rebbe who told us, I think it was Tov Shechai, one of the Fabrengens, empty your pockets. My father was no later. It was Tov Shin Chav Gimel, the Shnasa Akan, right, for the Alter Rebbe. Simon, 200 years, 150 years. Well, the Rebbe said everyone should empty their pockets. My father was working. He got married, 1960, a few years after. And his friends, it's a spring, in other words, good Chaveda from Eretz Yisrael. As they come, they say, you made money this week. The Rebbe wants you to empty your pockets and give it to the Rebbe. He says, I'll give you some money, but I can't empty my pockets. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy. That's a Rebbe. A Chassid. But in Russia, the Chasidim were trained that the money they have, but derech klal, I'm just showing you that it's not that everyone has a struggle to give away money. It's a very hard thing, but the Russian Chasidim, but derech klal, were trained in Rusland that the money's not theirs. They have some money. Shver also told me that he learned how to give tzedakah from his uncle at Mendel Futterfass. How did he? And he told me. I asked him how. He said, I'll tell you. And Mendel taught him that all the money belongs to the Rebbe. If you need a little money to eat in your family, you take a little money. And he said that's the way he lived. This wasn't just lip service. Reb Mendel made good money in the black market, and he raised a lot of money. I mean, he did very well for himself. Everything went to Teim Ketmimim and to the Chadorim and to the Rebbe. Ad kadei kach, so much so, when he raised money, when he already was in Eretz Yisrael, and he came here, he traveled around to raise with Motel Kazlina, another Russian chassid for the yeshiva over there in Nakos HaChabad or whatever. And the beginning, when he came, so he said, who gets the... In Kfar Chabad, or Nachas Chabad, they said, give us the money. You're raising money, give us the money and we'll use it. He said, I'm not giving you the money. The money gets some Rebbe, and the Rebbe will decide who and how gets the money. And he didn't give them the money. He gave the money to the Rebbe. This is what I heard. And the Rebbe did what he had to. Because they came complaining, we don't have sidewalks. And you're raising money. Give us some money to have sidewalks. He said, that's up to the Rebbe. If the Rebbe wants you to have a sidewalk and give you money for a sidewalk, he'll do it. If not, you're not getting the money. But they had a different way of looking at money. Really. They really did. They really did. My Shver once told me another things I remember, just since we're talking about this topic of money, it's important sometimes to spell it out. Shver once told me, Medaf Aschus, one needs a great merit as the Rebbe will nehmen von dir Geld, that the Rebbe should take from you money. Because he would send the Rebbe Maimed money to support the Rebbe, and I think it was quite large amounts of money over the years. And, he he had through Yom Klein at the time, it should go directly to the Rebbe. He didn't want any secretaries, organizations. The money is for the Rebbe. And the Rebbe decides what to do with the money. Anyway, let's go back to the Mittler Rebbe, because that's the... So the Mittler Rebbe, so they had to raise money, and Chasidim gave money. So then, how much they gave? They gave 35,000 ruble. Mittler Rebbe had asked in a letter to Reb Pinchas Reizes. Pinchas Reizes was Chassid the Alter Rebbe, but he lived into the Mittler Rebbe's time, that he and Reb Shlomo Reizes, I forget his name, and the Shlomo Freides and another Chassid Reizes, a brother or brother-in-law, whatever, should raise the funds. And they raised funds. Pinchas Reizes passed away in Lubavitch while the Mittler Rebbe was still alive. And he had a relative who was a Misnagdim, who didn't like Chasidim. He still didn't get over it. And his name was Simcha Kisen, I think was his name. And he said, "Oh, you're raising money, huh? 35,000. Well, he changed and he wrote, instead of 35, he put a kuf, 100, a Hebrew letter kuf, which is 100 before the 35, so it came out 135,000. 135,000 ruble. And then so he went with someone, another Misnagdim, they went to the Governor General, and they said, this Mittler Rebbe is trying to really rebel against you, the Russian government, the Tsar, and he's also sending money to the Sultan, Turkey, which was the enemy of Russia, yeah, the Tsar, and he concocted, means he made up this ganze Baba Maisa, but, you know, he submitted his papers, and that's how the interrogation began. This is the story. Okay? Okay. Until recently, about 20, 30 years, we thought that the whole story was several months. But in 1997 or Mashu Kazeh, something like that, they found the tik, the entire the archive of the entire episode of the Mittler Rebbe and everything I'm telling you and much more. And over there, it was realized that it actually started in 1825. It finished in 1827, so it was 2 years. Not 3-4 months, 2 years. But luckily, there's a lot of details, but just luckily, they didn't put the Mittler Rebbe in prison. They let him be in house arrest. Because he proved that, you know, that he's a tzaddik, is a person that's a nice person, and the Governor General accepted it. So, but an interrogation has to be done. Once it's submitted, you have to check it out. You have to see what's going on. So he was in house arrest. So during house arrest, he was able to say Chassidus, and he said Maimonim, but nevertheless, it was surrounded by guards, and it wasn't a pretty situation. Mittler Rebbe wasn't in the best of health. So what happened on Yud Kislev is that he was vindicated. It was proven, Sofat Dvorim, the end result was that he didn't have 135,000 ruble. I don't need 35,000. And he didn't violate the laws, the Tsar's rules that a rabbi is not allowed to put pressure on congregants, on balabatim, to give money, because he gets a maskoides, he gets a salary. And that's it. That was the rule at the time. You get a salary, any pressure on a balabas to give you money is a violation of government law. So he proved that he didn't do that, and many other things, and he was vindicated. And from that day up, so that was in 1827, 1827, 1826. And the next year, a day before, they were going to celebrate Chasidim and with the Rebbe, the Yud Kislev. He passed away. Tests on the same day that he was born, today, Shabbos like today. Not, it wasn't on a Shabbos. I don't think it wasn't on Shabbos. No, but Al Kapanim. So the first year it was a sad, and they didn't celebrate. And the next year they celebrated. So how many years is it? 194 years that we are celebrating Yud Kislev. 194 years. I always say to my Chavedim in Borough Park, the other Chasidim, I want you to show me another Chassidus that can say that we celebrate an event of a Rebbe 194 years consecutively, or Alter Rebbe even longer. The pedigree, the tradition of Lubavitch, of Chabad, of this Chassidus is real. It's not, like there's a Rav in Hungary, and all of a sudden he decides to become a Rebbe, and so some people come. It's a good Zach, it's a gewaltige Zach, it's great. But you're talking about something very different. The four Chassidissen, the Russian Chassidissen, you know what the four Chassidissen are? The Russian Chassidim. Karlin, Stalin, right? Breslev, Chernobyl, and Lubavitch. Those are the four Russian Chassidim. There's Polish Chassidim, Galician Chassidim, and Hungarian Chassidim. The four Russian Chassidim, the four Russian groups, go back a long time. But within those groups itself, let's say with Reb Nachman of Breslev, right? Reb Nachman didn't leave a relative to be a Rebbe. So Reb Nachman, his Talmud became Ki'ilu a Rebbe. And we have writings that are very good. But I'm saying this tradition, 7 deities, 7 generations, this is Lubavitch. That's what I was saying before. You have to sometimes be proud. There's a time for pride. Not that someone else is no good, chas v'shalom. Everyone's good, kulam ahuvim, everyone's beloved. But when you become a Lubavitcher, or when you a Lubavitch, you should know you're coming to a chassidus, a living organism of chassidus is Lubavitch. This isn't, as we say in Hebrew, kan nimtzika. It came out of the blue. It didn't come out of the blue. So this is Yud Kislev. And today, 194 years later, I was also thinking to my wife about this. What are we celebrating? On one hand, I don't understand what we're celebrating. I'll tell you what I don't understand. Maybe Rabbi Levin has an insight, but I think it's pretty poshut. But my question is this. The Bittul Rebbe wasn't in prison. His life was not in danger. No, the Alter Rebbe was. He was able to say Chassidus. So what's the big celebration? That Tzemach Tzedek was also. It says when he went to Petersburg, he was also a. But they didn't make a Yom HaGeula. No, Chassidim made a Yom HaGeula. And by the way, our Rabbeim, until the Frierdiker Rebbe and really the Rebbe, there was only 3 times a year that Rashab verbringt. Yud Kislev, Yud Tes Kislev, and Purim. Look in Torah Shalom. That's the 3 times. Huh? Simchas Torah wasn't. Simchas Torah was no. It's not the Yontif. Yeah, of course Simchas Torah, but that was anyway. Yeah. So why? So this, what I realized is this answers something that people ask. Why do we celebrate, let's say, Rosh Chodesh Kislev a few weeks ago? The Rebbe felt better. He left 770. Excuse me. It's now tough. What do we celebrate? Like, this question is asked many times. And what's the answer? But Pashas, the answer is Lahavdil. You celebrate Lincoln's birthday and George Washington's Lahavdil. That's Pashas. But also, when a Rebbe has a geula, even if it's not the incarceration and the tfisa like the Alter Rebbe had, it's a simcha by a chassid. And this simcha by the chassid, he lives with the simcha. It's real to him. And therefore, the fact that the Rebbe is gesund is not relevant right now, of course it is. Because it is a simcha that your Rebbe is gesund. Whether he was gesund, he is gesund, but you're celebrating that the Rebbe became gesund. The Mittler Rebbe 194 years ago had a geula. So we celebrate this geula. And this is a different way of thinking. This is not what we call Western thinking. Western thinking is Goyish thinking, Harvard thinking, Yale thinking, college thinking. Yiddish thinking, and especially Chassidish thinking, is a very different way. You don't think about things the way you think about, things that happen in the world that it says in this science journal and in this mathematics book. That's not the way a Yid thinks, b'chlal, and definitely not the way a Chassid thinks. How does a Chassid think? We'll talk about that soon. L'chaim, l'chaim. Say l'chaim. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. No? Bye.